The first thing to say is you're getting a lovely recent profile pic of mine. So this just happened over the summer, and I thought, why not share it with the audience? So there you go. That's me. In July, I think it's no June of this year. The other thing to say is why are we doing this webinar? So as it turns out, today is the day that the EU AI Act comes into effect. So that's a wonderful coincidence. But the other reason why we're doing this is because this study garnered a lot of attention nationwide in Ireland when it landed in June of this year. And as a result, the two partners involved, Cedar and Iter Analytics, received queries about this work. And it was triggering for some people in relation to the topic because it's quite relatable, given that it's an essential service that's provided in many, many countries across the world. As in, it's compulsory to have car insurance if you're going to be out on the road driving. And also the EU AI Act part of it is something that people are starting to get to grips with. And while we might be a little bit ahead of the curve here, there's been no better time to start getting to grips with this wonderful piece of legislation. So without further ado, I will crack on. You will be seeing my lovely mug again at the end. So if you, let's see if I can get this to move. Okay, there we go. Right, so just a disclaimer. My full title as it stands is on the top here. I am in receipt of EU money for the award, for the Marie Curie Award. And this research, as I said, was jointly produced by Cedar and Iter Analytics. But what I'm going to present today and what I'm going to say to you reflects only my views, and neither Enterprise Ireland nor the European Commission are responsible for anything that is disclosed today. Okay, and just to say along the bottom are my key affiliations in relation to not just this work, but my Marie Curie Fellowship. And those affiliations will come with us at the various stages as long as the graphics are not in the way. So the agenda today is to share with you some inspiration as to how this all came about, and then more robustly, the motivation that anchors it to the regulation and to some standards. It's another element that I'll dwell on for a bit. Then I'll go into some, share with you some information around the methods that we used, and then of course the results. And then finally, I'll give more links to information at the end, and then of course a Q&A. But I just want to stress that you don't have to wait until the very end to jump in. If you have something you want to say, or if you want to type something in, as I said, my colleague Connor is monitoring the chat and the Q&A function, and he's monitoring hands being raised and all the rest of it. So I do approve of being interrupted and strike while the iron's hot, so to speak. So please do feel free to interrupt me at any stage. That's absolutely fine. So in terms of inspiration, so I'm going to start with this paper, Italian paper from 2021. And the author on the top left, Alessandro Fabbri, is I would consider him a good friend of mine, and we've kept in touch ever since I first met him at the very first European workshop on algorithmic fairness in 2022 in Zurich. And he presented this paper at that workshop. And that's where I first got the idea of mystery shopper as a thing you could do to try and investigate algorithmic bias. And in this instance, it was to the Italian car insurance market. But I've subsequently learned that the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK have ratified mystery shopper exercises as a legitimate and ethical way to uncover algorithmic bias in many sectors and domains. So my first kind of gift to you today, well, second gift, first was my profile picture, but second is to consider the idea of mystery shopping in clever ways, in ways that can connect with the EU AI Act and can basically be of interest to society, EU citizens, and further afield, and also keep everybody on their toes. So where it is appropriate, you could consider adopting personas. So you create personas and you use the online platforms to input these personas to get back a decision that's more and more likely to be enhanced or assisted by AI in some form. And then if you do it enough times and in a kind of concerted and experimental design way, you can try to look at some experiments to test for things in relation to bias, for example, and uniformity of decisions across many different types of personas, right? So Alessandro came out with this, and I'll credit him with the first paper that I'm aware of on this. And he got about 20,000 quotes, which he did manually over 2 weeks. And he said it was very, very painful. Another plug for Alessandro and some of the colleagues that are his co-authors on this paper is something he went on to do when he expanded. I'm just going to, I don't know if this is in the way for people, but I'm just going to move this out of the way. So yes, another gift for you guys today is I'm going to drop some QR codes along the way. And the QR codes are going to relate to what you can see on the screen. So this one is what Alessandro went on to do, which is to create a repository of fairness data sets. And I'm looking to actually incorporate the data set that we have that I'm going to be talking about today, and I'll provide more information on that towards the end of the session today. But for those that are interested to explore the repository that Alessandro and his colleagues have put together, please feel free to zap the QR code here on the right of the screen and make a note of the web address. So it's a good resource, and there's plenty of data sets there to explore. So I commend Alessandro and his colleagues for going that direction after their Italian car insurance study. Now, the second inspiration came from a different type of group. So Alessandro is coming from the academic background, but these guys in the UK are coming from the Citizens Advice Bureau, and they did it, and it was a non-academic approach. And this got a lot of attention in the UK in 2022. And we actually reached out to these authors, as they're listed on the bottom here, to have a discussion about how they went about it. And then, of course, discussed their findings, which was that they said that they discovered an ethnicity penalty in the car insurance market in the UK. And this study was picked up by The Guardian, and it got nationwide coverage. And we discovered that these guys managed to get 649 quotes manually again over a period of a number of weeks. But to just showcase the ethnicity penalty in a bit more visual detail, so the graph here on the right shows that as the proportion of people of color in different areas increases, that they found that the average car insurance quote went up. Okay, and this was quite striking, and it's something that actually I'm going to return to, because it's a finding to bear in mind when I come to present the results of our study. So this was their key finding that they led on, and then compelled the car insurance industry to respond in the UK. So moving into the motivation beyond the inspiration of great researchers that do this type of work. So as I said, the EU AI Act comes into effect today, and I'm referring to the text of the 13th of June 2024, which there's no more bold italics for those of you that have trawled through this act for the last 3 years. Yeah, 3 years it is. From the initial draft in April 2021, I have seen versions with many pages of text that are in bold italics. Well, this version finally has removed all that, and we're back to something that looks like the draft in 2021, except this is the final version. And for anybody doing research in trustworthy AI and this type of area and exploring bias, I can't encourage enough to sit down with this document and go at it and read it. But these days there's a number of ways you can do this. Obviously, like, you can use your preferred large language model if you want to get a summary that way, or you can use the old-fashioned search functions to go through it with the keywords that you're after. But however you want to do it, there's lots of stuff in here that's well worth appreciating. And so for me, I'm going to showcase how, using the traditional method of search functionality, how I was able to extract pieces that are relevant to the car insurance study I'm talking about today. So, memorandum of understanding comes first in the Act, and paragraph number 96, which I pulled out, and of course you might imagine that I searched through the document for insurance, And the reason why I pulled this out is if you read it on the screen, you'll see that, well, I don't mind reading it verbatim, I have 2 hours. In order to efficiently ensure that fundamental rights protected deployers of high-risk AI systems that are bodies governed by public law or private entities providing public services and deployers of certain high-risk AI systems, note they keep mentioning high risk, listed in the annex to this regulation, such as banking and or insurance entities, right? So they're talking about high-risk AI, and they've name-checked those 2 sectors. Okay, and then they say they should carry out a fundamental rights impact assessment prior to putting it into use. Okay, so that's a nugget that I like to pull out to strengthen my case. Then we go to, so this one was about high risk. I said high risk. So what are the high risk areas? Well, there are 8 high risk areas plus then a separate section to cover off general purpose foundation models. But going into the traditional, well, the original 8 areas, I'm going to pull out number 5, which is the one that speaks to car insurance. So the print might be a bit small on the screen here, but in Annex 3, they go through the different areas. And number 5 is in relation to access to enjoyment of essential private services and essential public services and benefits. Now, I've listed all 4 elements here, but the ones that I'm going to pick on for, or select for motivate my study, first of all, is this one. Now, someone did challenge me on, like, is car insurance really meeting the criteria here? Well, in relation to B here, and assessing the creditworthiness of natural persons, in relation to their credit score and doing a credit check on them. So in the car insurance industry, the typical way it is set up is that you are encouraged to buy 12 months of car insurance. So you search for a quote, and then they will give you a quote that covers 12 months. And you have the opportunity to buy it outright, or you can do it in monthly installments. If you choose to do it in monthly installments, the way it is considered from the car insurance provider side is that they are extending you a kind of a credit note that, okay, it costs, say, for example, 500 quid, but you want to break it down into monthly repayments. That means they're taking a chance that there's a chance you might not repay the 500, because then they're extending it out to 12 months. And therefore, in order to validate your, to minimize the risk of not getting the money back in terms of extending you 12 months car insurance upfront based on the fact that you're only going to pay a 12th of it in the first instance, they will do a soft credit check on you and essentially assess your creditworthiness. And that's how things are now. Okay, so I don't know what the future holds, but the assumption is that as we go forward in time with all the data collection and the ability to collect data gets better and better, and these models get more efficient, and it gets more efficient to use these machine learning models, that more and more assistance will be provided by AI in that area. And then the person who challenged me on the car insurance rightly pointed out that an area that gets its own point here is C, and that's in relation to life and health insurance. Okay, so actually, there's the next study, So we did car insurance, but again, as I said, if you go through this act, you will find opportunities if you're looking for them. Like what are the potential avenues of pursuit here to because there may be data available. You may not have to do a mystery shopper exercise, but this act will give back to you the domains that are considered high risk for all citizens of Europe, and there are opportunities here to explore this act, to interact with it in terms of where the opportunities may lie. Okay, so that is that. And then I'm going to move to the bias side, because the car insurance study that we were undertaking was to look at uniformity of premiums that were quoted to our drivers that we created. And that assessment basically is looking for like bias, but like the basically looking to see the distributions, how they differ depending on the type of persona we put in. And so if you're looking for justification on that investigation, Article 10, data and data governance, Section 2, it says the training and validation, actually I should take it off, jumped the gun there. Training, validation, and testing data sets shall be subject to data governance and management practices appropriate for the intended purpose of the high-risk AI system. Those practices shall concern in particular, and I've just highlighted F and G here because they're the ones that play to my own bias, which is with finding out bias. There are others, as you can see, there's a whole A, B, C, B, and D, E comes before. You can check them out. But in relation to bias, they're expected to examine these data sets for possible biases, and also to try to prevent and mitigate them. Okay. And like the world that we're in now, like I'll make the strong argument that for all agents operating in high risk areas, they're going to need help. The regulators are going to need help. Everybody's going to need help. That's my running assumption at the moment. This AI Act came into effect today, but many of the aspects of it are actually not going to kick in for like 2 years down the road, just a bit like there was grace periods allowed for GDPR when it first came in May 2018. Help is at hand and is going to get even more so as we go through time. But all stakeholders and most stakeholders are going to need help. And this car insurance, in its very, very small way, if you consider it like a very thin slice of a very large cake, is trying to help go in that direction. Okay, so that's a bit on the EUA Act and how you can pull it apart to get what you need from it to justify doing some research or an investigation, or even just learning more and more to see if you're caught by the Act. Like, are you in a high risk area? Do you need to take this seriously? If you're in a high risk AI area, you will need to undertake a conformity assessment before you deploy the AI on the market. Okay, and there will be more and more guidance coming out on this as we go through time. But yeah, the main thing is to get into the Act sooner rather than later. That is generally the advice given across the board, whether you're talking to more technically minded people like Conceder and Itero, or if you're talking to more legally minded people. And there's many legal firms looking to also provide guidance in this way, and the big consultant firms obviously as well. So all of the advice is to get into this sooner rather than later and to see how you might be impacted. But the other aspect of this is, so I'm going to move my own screen around here so I can see this. So the other aspect of this is on the how to do stuff. When it comes to the regulations in general, it's like, okay, they will talk about they will talk about like they'll avoid trying to say exactly how to do something to avoid getting trapped, but so of not being able to future-proof the legislation. So that then you lean on, like, what do you lean on? So one of the things you can lean on are published standards, okay? And ISO is the International Standards Organization, and I can tell you, because I'm involved in it now, that there is a lot of attention being focused on AI. So it tends to follow the demand, so to speak. And in 2021, this particular standard came out, bias in AI systems and AI aided decision making. I can tell you that it's gone up from 166 Swiss francs to 173 Swiss francs. Now that's inflation for you. The last time I shared this slide, I pulled that off last night compared to when I did it the previous time. But it's free for bona fide university researchers, I believe. Certainly in UCD, we benefit from UCD having a license. So check if you're able to get access to these standards. There's also samples online. There's a sample you can see here in the clip. But essentially, these standards can play a role in terms of like shaping best practice, in terms of how to comply, how to be, say, for example, if unbiased is a kind of an outcome of compliance with the AI Act, how to be unbiased, okay? This is where standards can come in. So that was already published when I arrived on the scene in 2021. But this one down below, I did try to pitch into, and it's not yet published, but it's at the very final stage. And so this is the treatment of unwanted bias in classification and regression machine learning tasks. And so we're moving from like taxonomies to like examples of like how you would set up investigating bias to then how you would try and treat it. Okay, so this is the way things are going. And I joined the National Standards Authority of Ireland to work specifically on this standard. And that's another thing I would recommend for people that have the capacity to do it, is to consider joining your national standards body. No matter what you can, like how much effort you can give, it doesn't have to be that onerous. Many of us have lots of things to do, other things to do, I should say. But yep, sorry, Connor has his hand raised.
There's a question for you in the Q&A, Adrian.
Oh yeah, sure. Do you want to read it out?
That's still at the bottom there. That should just be there. Oh, would it be easier for me to just let Paolo talk?
Yeah, Paolo, if you want to just jump in, go for it.
Yep, perfect. I'll allow him anyway. So you can unmute your mic if you like, Paolo.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi Paolo, can hear you. Yes.
Hi, David. Very nice so far. Thank you for this overview. No, just was just a reflection on the UI Act, you know. in comparison with other recommendations, not regulations, because we know that AI Act is the only law existing in the world so far on AI. But if we compare with the recommendations such as NIST, the American US NIST, it has in my opinion, a better definition of bias. As the bias that is in Article 10 refers only to bias that arise from the data.
Mm.
Whereas we know that bias can arise also from the model, and possibly it is in some cases inherent in human thinking. So that is what NIST makes more explicit. So I just wanted to hear your opinion on this aspect.
Well, Paolo, you've beat me to it, because my next slide actually has an attribution to NIST. But it's an absolutely great point. And yes, it's and it's right to be critical of what you can see in the AI Act. And actually, it's something I might do afterwards, is to actually go through the document again and look for model bias or mention of it if it's in the memorandum of understanding or anything. To see if there's anything on model bias. But you're absolutely right to raise it. And as I said, the how-to and the best practice extends beyond the confines of the AI Act in Europe. And so, like, just because it's not there, it doesn't mean that someone can go towards going further and going beyond. And I actually think that might happen. And I also think that another way this might happen, Paolo, is that non-high risk AI providers and deployers may also organically want to showcase that they are compliant, and they've got a really unbiased setup, or they've got a great way to do unbiased analysis. And so I think this is one of those carousels where people are going to want to jump on, and exactly in the way that you say as well, Paolo. So, but watch for my niece contribution in the next slide, and see if and feel free to come back if my reference is not
fully aligned then. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm going to get there pretty quick now at this stage, but I just want to add one more thing to so another gift for you guys. I'm the guy that keeps on giving today. Again, I'm just going to move this out of the way. This is hot off the press. Given my association with NSAI in Ireland, I'm then affiliated with Sensenelec in Europe, and then ISO globally. But I can tell you that there's another work in the pipeline. So as I said, the demand is there, and people are looking to do more and more standards now. And this is the title for the one that's coming down the tracks for Sensenelec. Okay, so again, this is new work, and if it's something that gets you out of bed in the morning, feel free to get in touch with me, and I can signpost for across Europe with my contacts across Europe, or in Ireland as well, if you want to get involved and sit in on these meetings or join the project group. There's no better time to do it than at the start, as I learned myself when trying to influence the draft standard down the bottom there. If you join the party late, it's a lot harder to make a contribution. I'll just give you that as a piece of advice. So now moving towards Paolo's suggestion. Before we get there, Paolo didn't mention IEEE, but that is another body that does standards. And I'm just going to mention one that I picked out and I've been aware for a while, P7003. Again, another thing you might happen if you are in the standards game, you get familiar with the numbers. You just got to memorize the numbers that matter to you when you're searching through the databases. And actually, these guys have gone backwards, it seems, because they didn't have draft standard the last time I had this. I pulled this off, and actually, it's a good thing when you're doing your slides to redo the search, because if you hold on to the slide from a year ago in the AI space, you might run the risk of being out of date. And actually, these guys had just algorithmic bias considerations initially as the title, and now they've gone draft standard, and they've actually taken a step back in their claims, which is really interesting. But anyway, without further ado, there you go, Paolo. So NIST don't say standard. they do that classic thing that I learned when I was doing my PhD of saying towards something. So towards the standard for identifying and managing bias in artificial intelligence. And as you can see, it came out in 2022, and it is a very comprehensive document and well worth a read and a review. And again, these are big documents, but like use the same type of tricks to get the pieces of the nuggets out of it that that you're interested in at the time that you're looking. But they're good reference guides to have. So thanks again, Paolo, for mentioning this. And in terms of like best practice, it is important to kind of do a broad sweep, and you don't just have one point of failure. A single point of failure is generally a bad idea in systems design and engineering. So the same should apply for when you are trying to achieve best practice. And I'll try to suggest that I'm doing something like that when I showcase the results in a moment when I get to the results part of my talk. But just before that now, Paolo and myself were in Malta, and we were in Malta for a reason. The reason we were there was the second Explainable AI conference. And there was a proceedings book that came out of that, and that the front page is on the left there. And so I don't know if it's probably not affecting you, but I'm gonna have to just move moving myself around the screen here so you can see the QR code. So I published a chapter in this book, the conference proceedings, and there's the QR code. And you'll be delighted to know that I paid the 2,290 euros to make it open access for all of you to enjoy, because the default setting was that this was a subscription-based approach, and you would have to pay the money to Springer to read the articles, but not mine. So I dressed this up as a chapter in the book, and there's the QR code, which I'll hang over if you want to get the address. That should take you straight to the web page of my chapter, and the results. I do encourage you to have a look at the paper, and you can have a look at it alongside today, and feel free to come back to me if you have any queries, because I won't be going into the same level of detail that is in that paper. But there you go. That's it there. And but my results I present today should be consistent with that. And the reference, by the way, for those looking for that reference, the Competition and Markets Authority reference to justify doing mystery shopper exercise, go ahead. I provided in that paper. It should be in the methods section, right up the top. So if you need more justification to do a mystery shopper exercise. Okay, so getting down to the nuts and bolts of the study. The research questions turned out to be as follows. Okay, so we want to know the factors that determine Irish car insurance premiums, how they're set. We wanted to just do the simplistic check of like whether gender and ethnicity fair by name are directly affected or related to the quoted premiums. And then riskier drivers or drivers in general, as it turned out, to check whether there's uniform, are the outcomes uniformly distributed, regardless of, say, for example, location or occupation. Okay. And these were the type of questions we could address with the study. And I'll impress upon you that there's so much we didn't do that's left undone for now. And I think that'll become clear when I kind of walk you through the kind of the methods and the decisions we had to take, because all of this is borne out by the fact that we go along to these insurance websites and we have to input the answers to the fields, the questions that they ask. That's our frame of reference. We don't go outside of that. But even with that, like the 20-odd questions that you're asked to get the quote, there's so many things you could look at. So before we go there, I just want to showcase the software that was used in a general sense. So if you're not familiar, on the right is Jupyter Notebook. And it might be hard to see, but it is a really flexible bit of software. It's free. And I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right up the top here, sorry, my screen is, but up the top, you might recognize the Python symbol here. Okay, and then there's the OR for those that are more statistically minded here. So this thing is, and there's many more running around there. C# down here. There are many other packages that are faded out in gray here. So it's a really flexible software and really easy to use as well, gentle. And for those of you that are new to data science and machine learning, don't be afraid. It's just there's so many resources online. It's wonderful. But because I come from a statistics background, as does Paolo, as we know, because we were chatting in Malta, I also use some statistical software, which I was familiar with before doing the Marie Curie fellowship. And this is not free, but if you happen to be working in certain universities, they may have a site license, as UCD has here in Dublin. But there are very few. It's getting to the case where state is going to have to keep fighting really hard to justify the cost when, like, you can open up Jupyter and Python, and the combination can be lethal with all the packages that it has at its disposal. But I still used its functionality for some log linear modeling, which I'll showcase in a bit. And then in terms of how we did the data collection, so these are the two Python packages that you need to be aware of. So Beautiful Soup helps you scrape data from the web, and then Selenium helps you automate it. Okay, so I'm not going to go into any more detail on that, but if you want to know more, please reach out, and I can provide more information. But in essence, that's what you need if you want to do an online mystery shopper exercise. Then now, in terms of the explainability side of life, and bias detection, in my opinion, is an explainable AI endeavor. Because I don't think it's really valid to try and do bias detection in a covert black box way. Although I'm happy to have the arguments with other learned scholars. So here we have three different approaches that come in after you run your model. So people might be familiar with SHAP. SHAP is probably the front runner. From the conference that myself and Paolo were just at, this Explained by AI conference. My God, SHAP won it by a country mile when it comes to references. You would be hard pressed to go into a session of the 3-day conference where SHAP wasn't being presented on the screen. So everybody is using SHAP. It's free. It's fairly easy to use. It does get quite heavy computationally quite quickly the more data you have. So in terms of number of rows and number of columns in your data set. But it does produce some very nice graphics, as I'll show you in a bit. The one down the bottom, recursive feature elimination with cross-validation, is kind of like a check that I come across. So I would say that, like, if you have to pick one, you should go with SHAP. But if you want to validate that, just as I recommended with going through the different standards and comparing ISO standards with the NIST approach and all the rest of it, and not just having a single point of failure, I think it's a good idea to have multiple, because none of these are absolutely like gospel, and you don't need to look anywhere else. I do think in this world of data analysis, there is such a thing as variation, and but if you do things in a number of ways, you start to coalesce or converge around an inference that you can hang your hat on, as I've done in this study. So I use recursive feature elimination with cross-validation to validate what SHAP was showing. And the other benefit of this approach in scikit-learn, that you need to go through the scikit-learn route, and that's why I've left that tag in, is that it's computationally more efficient than SHAP. And the last one is just an absolute statistical trick that like on its own I wouldn't put much weight on it, but this comes from my statistics background. And if you're in the world of running statistical models, for those of you that are familiar with, you'll get coefficients out of it. So if you have variables in the model trying to predict a target, or features trying to predict a target, or explainable regressors trying to predict an outcome regressor, then you're going to create these model coefficients, and they're going to have accompanying standard errors. And essentially, one way of trying to assess importance or strength of that coefficient relative to other coefficients in the model is to take its beta coefficient divided by a standard error. And then, of course, you're only interested in the magnitude of it, so you take the absolute value of it. Okay, and this is just a really crude way to assess, like, if I had to order them, if I had to order the variables in the output as to what's doing the most driving. And on its own, as I said, it's very, very crude. But the level of agreement with SHAP and recursive feature elimination was more than satisfactory from my perspective, as I'll try to demonstrate when I get to the results. Not done with the methods, though. So let's move on to some of the decisions we had to take. So if anybody's into combinatorics or permutations and combinations, this thing can blow up very quickly in terms of like setting the confines of the data set. So we took a lot of decisions. And when it comes to the age, we took 3 ages, okay? And you can see them there. And not only did we do that, but to make life simple, we then linearly associated these with driving experience and policy in your own name. So these are 3 features. So you'll be asked for your date of birth on the form, which will elicit your age. And then they also ask for years of driving experience and also years of having a policy in your own name. These are important car insurance variables. And what we did to start off is we basically made age a perfect proxy for driving experience and policy in your own name. So going forward, when you see age in our models, it's not just representing the age of the driver, it's also a perfect proxy for driving experience and policy in years of policy in your own name. And the relationship is presented on the screen here. And just to say about proxies, by the way, because proxies and bias detection is a very important aspect to consider. More generally, if you have a feature set and a target, you need to give consideration to proxies in 2 ways. One is that the thing that you're trying to measure, if you don't have it and you have an approximate, how good is that proxy for the thing you're actually trying to measure, okay? In predictive policing, for example, they would like to know, like, what is the likelihood of someone being a bad person? Okay, that is not something you can measure directly, but you can measure how many call outs or the amount of time the police car spends in one neighborhood versus another as a proxy for bad guys. That could be the gap between what you're trying to measure and what you actually have access to and what you can measure. That proxy could be a good proxy or a bad proxy. That's something to be interrogated depending on the use case. The other proxy of interest for bias detectives like myself is that in what way are the features you're using? Because a lot of people say, oh, no, we're not biased, right? We don't have any sense of attribute information in our data set. We don't go there, right? So fairness, true, and awareness, right? We don't ask for people's ethnicity. We don't ask for people's sex, so on, right? But the thing is, have you demonstrated that the data that you do use in your models is not correlated with people's ethnicity and people's gender and maybe the case might be that age is a valid one to be. Sometimes age is a very valid one to use because it represents experience and maturity, say in your career and all the rest of it. But just like, again, we're moving into the realm of demonstrate. Don't just tell me. Demonstrate that you've checked into this. And I know that we're still a long way to go on this. Based on some discussions I had in Malta at Explainable AI conference and meeting some people from industry, that they were shaking their heads. They just like, what are you talking about? So they still think fairness, true, and awareness is absolutely fine. And I hope to impress upon the world in due course that that's just unacceptable as we move forward. You must demonstrate. And where the rubber is going to meet the road is you could end up in court. With the liability directive that's coming along with the AI Act, any concerned citizen in Europe can take a case if they feel like they've been discriminated against in any sector, but especially the high risk ones. And the burden of proof will be on the provider and the deployer of that AI system to demonstrate that that person could not be discriminated against. Okay, so we're moving from talking to doing. I segued there just to give you a bit on the proxies. Moving on with our decisions. What else have I said here? Okay, so ethnicity is not collected in the Irish car insurance market. So what we had to do was infer it by name. So we got names from online databases, and so we went for classical sounding names that are English, Irish, and then non-English Irish like Indian, Brazilian, Polish, and so on. I will have a slide on the names we picked, right? But one of the things that we did, just for simplicity, and this is a big thing for the ethnicity investigation, we didn't change this, right? So we assumed that all drivers were Irish residents since birth and held full Irish driver's license. They are pretty critical, I would imagine. If we change those, that is a good thing to change and to investigate, okay? But we didn't do it in this study, right? That's a big one. We just did a very simple check to see whether or not the name mattered. And that would have been very sensational had it mattered. Spoiler alerts, it didn't. Because that would have been absolutely huge had it been the case that if they were all Irish citizens, all having full Irish licenses, and then you change the name from an Irish name to a non-Irish name, that would have been very sensational. But everybody can breathe a sigh of relief. That's not what we found. But like, to be more realistic, we should look at, and to do this in a deeper way, we should be like changing these variables and having people that arrived into the country after birth and also not having full Irish driver's license, and to then see if that's uniform across different ethnicities. Okay. And then toggling that with, of course, Irish residents that may be young and not having full Irish license either. So that's an opportunity for anybody that wants to take it. Another thing we did, and you might be surprised at this, but we had to do something. We had everybody as full-time employed, single and renting. Okay. That might be strange from an Irish perspective. So what, 60-year-olds renting? Nah, come on. We're a nation of home buyers, right? House buyers. But that's just the way it was. We wanted to keep so many things fixed so that when the things that we did change, we could assess the effect of that. It's just the way you do it in proper experiments. But again, the difference between owning and renting, I'm sure we'd find something there if we looked at it. And single versus married as well. So I'm not going to assume it would be uniform. Never assume that. As I say, demonstrate it. Oh, and of course, the driver's not named on another policy. That could definitely matter if you were named on another policy, because I've heard it can help. And then, yes, seeking fully comprehensive rather than third-party foreign theft or third-party alone. More assumptions. Again, we decided to go for the most popular brand in Ireland, which is the Volkswagen Golf. But we took a 2-liter turbo diesel 5-door estate model. That's just what we did. We were looking at car dealership websites online and getting a sense for what was on sale recently, but consistently with our story, as I'll present in a minute. But anyway, we fixed the car for all the drivers. And obviously, if you change the car for different drivers, it will have an impact. Again, you could assess the uniformity of that. We didn't do it. This is to be consistent. If the car was registered in 2020, and we did this study starting in 2022 into 2023, we wanted to say that all drivers had the car for a year, so that they were in a situation where they were renewing it. So that even the youngest drivers had a policy in their own name for a short amount of time. The car was kept on private property. That's another thing you're asked for. Obviously, if you change that, like it's parked in the street, we would expect to see variation there. And then another thing just to add, that online I looked around to see if I could get an indication of the average mileage done in Ireland, and there you go. That's what it was turning out. So we gave every driver the same average mileage and the kilometer equivalent. Okay, so these are a lot of things we had to keep fixed in order to investigate the experiments we did investigate. And of course, it's not comprehensive across the entire country. We were down to the level of postcode, air code in Ireland. So that's very, very specific. It's house specific. So we had to get addresses from different parts of Ireland, but we could not cover the entire country. So we had to pick, we had to be selective. And on the screen, you can see ways in which we did this to try and get contrast. So we did an urban-rural contrast. We did variation on property prices, variation on socio-economic deprivation, ethnic diversity based on the census, and bear that in mind in relation to the UK study that I showed you previously. And then per capita statistics on crime, and then road traffic accidents and penalty points, which I would have assumed would be quite important for car insurance providers to keep in mind. But that's just showing you how we picked locations. And then finally, this is the time frame. So quotes were obtained from 10 different car insurance websites. And we're not here to name and shame. It's not the reason we're doing it. We did use 10 online in the Irish car market. But we would be, again, we want to walk that fine line of being on the research side, the citizen side, the regulator side, and the industry side. There's nothing about this that shouldn't be across all of these different areas. And we would be happy to work with the car insurance industry going forward to help comply and also help establish best practice. As Paolo was saying, like, you have data bias, you have model bias. So there's ways in which we can try to achieve best practice in raising awareness in the first instance around how to do bias detection, let alone mitigate it, which is getting into more subjective political territory. Which will bear out in time, I imagine, in the courts. We'll all be paying attention to the legal cases as they emerge. And of course, good investigative journalism too. Okay, so we're ready for the results. What time am I at? Okay, 5:12. Let's go. Got an hour and 5 minutes, and I'm motoring along here. I don't think I'm going to get anywhere near 1 o'clock, so we're doing well, guys. We might be able to have an early lunch, unless we have a very lively discussion, which is also great in my opinion. So I did tell you that the previous two studies I used as inspiration, the Italian one got about 20,000 quotes after 2 weeks of really hard manual labor for Alessandro. And then the second, the UK study, got 649 quotes. Again, with manual labor, one person, not working as intensely as Alessandro over 2 weeks, but spread it over a greater number of weeks. What we managed to do through our automated way is get almost 40,000 quotes. Now, just to say that not all of them were usable. So the ones that were valid and usable was 30,325. We got some zeros, 22 zeros back, which we couldn't use. And then we got no quote for 9,502, right? And it's a shame that we can't analyze this in greater detail, because we couldn't determine whether the reason that we didn't get a quote was because of a technical malfunction or because they shut that driver out. It is likely that the driver could have been shut out, because if they perceive you as a risky enough driver, they may refuse you a quote online and tell you to call them. Okay, that they won't give it out. And that's another reason why we don't want to name and shame any car insurance provider here, is because we would talk to them about this aspect of it. They're not all shutting the same risky drivers out. So some car insurance providers will provide a quote for risky drivers, whereas others won't. And therefore, the average quote for that insurer will be lower than the insurer that does provide a quote online. So that difference can lead to the impression that some car insurance providers are more expensive than others. But it could be the case that's because they're simply providing prices for riskier, perceived riskier drivers, whereas others are shutting them out quicker and saying, you got to call us. But if we knew for sure that it was that reason, then we could have explored these 9,500 cases. But because there was also the possibility of a technical glitch, or a CAPTCHA jumping up or something like that to say, before we give you the quote, you have to do a CAPTCHA. Our scraping mechanism wasn't good enough to negate that. And so therefore it made redundant that investigation. But if we had been tighter, if we'd have done it manually and we knew which was which, we could have singled out the no quotes. And maybe that's future research for somebody here, or, for anybody, is to go further than we did in this regard as well, is to explore the no quotes and to single out the ones that were shut out, and then to see if that's uniform. Again, everything to do with bisexuality, as far as I'm concerned, in this study is about investigating uniform distribution of outcomes across different sensitive attributes, and that are protected under law, under anti-discrimination law, and raising awareness around that. Okay. Yes, this is a heavy one, and I may come back to this, and feel free to stop me and digest this. This table is in the book chapter, but I'll do my best to speak to it here, and I'll walk you through it. So I'm presenting 5 models here, which kind of represent 5 experiments, and given that I showed you that the total quote number was just over 30,000 that were usable, you'll notice that the number of observations in the first row, are much lower than that. And that's because when we started to run our experiments, a lot of people got excluded. So in the first second column, as you can see it on screen, ethnicity by name model. So that was only a male only. We only explored that using male names only. So that means all the women in our data set were excluded. Okay. And then that meant that where we had data on women, the non-Irish males were excluded. So it worked both ways. So you'll see that where ethnicity is in the model, gender is not, and where gender is in the model, ethnicity is not. And that meant that ethnicity was only being assessed in one of these models, whereas gender was being assessed in 4 models. And where gender is in the model, it means that we're just looking at Irish men and women. Okay, or Irish and English named men and women, but not non-Irish names. Okay, which was male only, right? That's the first thing. The second row to talk about in the data is LLR. Now these are explained down below, but I'll just say this is my Stata 18 log linear regression model. Okay, so this is a really explainable model, right? But obviously the accusation is from all the data scientists in the room is, it's way off. It's not accurate enough. Look at that score. So I give you the adjusted R squared here. Adjusted R squared is better than just the typical R squared because it penalizes you for the number of parameters in the model. And you can see that the values here are such, but then if you look at the next one down, we do a random forest regression model. That's what RFR stands for. So our target here is quote. Okay. Now for the log linear model, we've adjusted for the fact that the quote was skewed. I'm not going to show you a histogram of the quote distribution, but it's generally skewed, right? So you've got a mass that's closer to, say, lower amounts, and then you've got some stream outliers that are dragging it. So the mean is going to be affected by that, right? So in order to account for that, we take a log base 10 transformation, and it kind of centers the distribution, and therefore we can invoke the Gaussian normal distribution theory that's required to believe the assumptions of such a linear model. And that's why I'm calling it a log linear model, right? But you don't need to worry about that when you're dealing with a random forest regression model, because it's a bigger beast, and it's a better beast in terms of accuracy. So when you have the target as quote, the quote amount, and it's explained by all the features, you can see, and these are the same feature sets, right? Same target, same feature set, and you can see the difference in scores. So scores like the accuracy for the random forest regression model. So it wins every single time. You might notice that for the log linear regression model, the just or squared jumps up, shoots up when we include claims and no claims bonus. This just goes to show two things. One is how important these, like whether you've made a claim or not, and whether you have a no claims bonus or not, is for insurance pricing. Okay, and the NCB means no claims bonus, right? And it's a wonderful initiative designed by the industry, encouraging people not to use the service. You get rewarded for not engaging with your car insurance provider. It's called a no claim bonus. So and by contrast, you get punished for engaging with your car insurance provider and making a claim. Particularly if someone makes a claim against you, you'll lose your no claims bonus, but you'll also lose your no claims bonus if your insurer can't recover all the cost of the claim that you've made. Be very, very careful about that, by the way. If you get done by a hit and run and you can't get liability from a third party because they were not there, if you make a claim, you're going to lose your no claims bonus, right? And also, if you do have the access to the third party, if they don't admit liability, you have a fight in your hands. If it goes 50-50 in court, you'll lose your no claims bonus because 50% will be attributed to you. And if you do get a hold of them, but they don't have insurance, then your insurer can't recover the cost. You'll lose your no claims bonus. So in many ways here, even if you're not at fault and you make a claim, if you don't read the small print, you'll lose your no claims bonus. So to sum up, this is a beautiful initiative by the car insurance industry to say, we will reward you if you buy 12 months insurance. Don't bother taking direct debit. We would prefer if you take 12 months in, pay up front in advance, and never use it. And it's a very important variable then in the model for pricing. But these experiments were niche, and you'll see that the number of observations drops. So the other thing to say is this gets way more accurate because there's way less observations compared to the other three models to the left of it. Okay, so and that's just because we were running these experiments in real time. So as we were collecting data, we were making changes to the experiments, and we started looking at. So initially, we started with no claims bonus being completely linked to driving experience. Again, perfect proxy. But then we decided to take drivers that had zero no claims bonus versus 3 years no claims bonus. They were a new set of drivers that we created along the way. And you can see, like, to do that in a valid way, we also included telematic devices. So that's box clever. And it really just applies to young drivers, although I don't know whether they could discriminate if you wanted to put one in your car and you're not 25, say you're 60. Because they generally have a discount if you do take a device and put it in your car, which basically means they can track your driving. They can track your speed. I don't know whether they can track whether you go through red lights. But anyway, it's like having eyes on you the whole time. And if you're willing to go through that big brother approach, you will get a discount. That's why we included that. And then, of course, we were looking for claim amount. But these models, when we added more relevant, really specific car insurance features, the accuracy levels really improved for the log linear situation. And they also improved, but you can see the level of improvement for the random forest regression. And now you might be asking why I've highlighted what I've done here on the screen. So if we get down to the next thing, the first feature importance I'm going to show you is my very crude absolute value test statistics. So this is coming from the log linear approach, where I have the parameters attached to all of the features, and then I divide by the standard area and just take the absolute value to get the magnitude. So then I'm presenting the magnitude from high to low. So age, as I said, is a perfect proxy for driving experience and policy no name. So probably it's no surprise that shoots to the top of them carrying the most heft in the model, the 3 models, actually 3 models on the left, but then on the ones on the right, it plays, it gets silver medal to the claims one. But then location comes in third. And this really piqued our interest because this got me thinking about something I'm going to go into, which is intersectionality. I became very interested in like, oh, okay, so what if we look at interacting age and location, right? And what if we start interacting age, location, and maybe a car insurance variable as well, like in the models on the right there, because location kept cropping up as just under driving experience as a very important feature. Maybe not controversial, but just saying it came up. It was more important than the insurer that you went with. And it was more important than penalty points. It was more important than whether you had a box lever device in your car. It was more important than claim amount. But what's reassuring to show here is that both ethnicity inferred by name and gender played the least role. We found nothing. And even though you see day, hour, and month, we included them because we timestamped what we were doing. We can't really read into it too much because we, by design, created riskier drivers at different times in the year when we did the study. And the models were able to detect those patterns. So they were able to give back to us that they knew that we were doing riskier stuff at different times of the year. So by effect, by our own actions, we created that effect. So it's not meaningful to look at day, night, because we didn't do it in a way that was like monotonic that, okay, you could say, yeah, get up at 1 o'clock in the morning and it's worth doing your quote then. We can't say that with any certainty. We didn't look at that. That could be something, again, another study you could do, but we just kept it in because we knew it would be predictive. By design, we were going to create an effect there. There was a pattern. The models were able to detect it. It was whether or not something like gender or ethnicity was going to have a more of an effect than the time effect that we created by design. And as it turns out, there's nothing really to worry about there. And this is great from a car insurance point of view because gender bias in or gender discrimination in car insurance was outlawed, shall I say, in 2012 in the EU. So they can no longer discriminate. For example, for those that are Irish or familiar with Ireland car insurance on the call here today, there used to be a car insurance company called Just for Her, I think it was. So when I was like a young driver in Ireland and faced with massive quotes to promote women because women might have been getting tarnished by young men versus young women. There was a clear delineation in Ireland anyway between the two, boy racers, and you don't have girl racers really. They had this car insurance company that was Just for Her, which meant that they were providing car insurance for women, women only. When the legislation came out, they had to provide car insurance quotes for men too. And I think initially they just kept the name, but then eventually they changed it to Get Set Go. I think that's what happened there. So eventually that became discriminatory and they couldn't do that anymore. So anyway, our study showed that there's nothing to see here in terms of gender discrimination. So I would say that all these models, car insurance models, are primed for this. It's an easy thing to avoid and they do all avoid it. And then the other thing is ethnicity by name. It was a very simple check. As I said, we didn't mess around with citizenship and driving license. If we had done that, I would bet we would see something different. And then the question is whether it's uniformly different. But just on the simple check of changing the name, we didn't find anything to worry about there, nothing concerning. So, so anyway, this analysis just showing you on the screen here gave us the idea to think about, or certainly me, because I want to promote the idea of intersectionality. It's something that in bias detection, there's literature behind this. Kimberly Crenshaw came up with the term intersectionality. That's like, you know, and there was a famous case in America where black women took a case against, I think it's General Motors, but don't quote me on that. But essentially, they found that they were being discriminated, not just because they were black, not just because they were women, but because they were black women. And that's the essence of intersectionality. It's to be more accurate in terms of who's being discriminated against and being more accurate in general. Now, the downside of trying to do intersectionality is you need lots more data, because if you keep stratifying and interacting between features, you're going to run out of data like cells. There'll be low cell counts, and that's a problem. So that's why we you know, we could try and do this because we had so many quotes to start with, but it does fall down drastically when you try to do this. And that's why I would encourage you, if you're going to run experiments and you do want to do intersectionality, bear in mind that you're going to need an awful lot of data to do it well. Okay. And the other thing, say I've highlighted occupation and penalty points because they're going to come back into play in a little while in some of the visuals I'm going to show. But first, I want to just highlight the NCB model on the right to showcase the difference between the absolute value test statistic and the SHAP and the recursive feature elimination with cross-validation. Just as an example, you can see, I'll give a reference at the end for how you can see more than just this. But let's just go with this for now. So as I said, SHAP produces some very nice visuals, I think. And this is this NCB model, right? And as you can see here, it was, okay, so the number one feature that mattered, driving the most, was no claims bonus, okay? And in this model, it was no years, no claims bonus. So that's the worst you can be as a driver. You've got no evidence of not making a claim. Versus 3 years, no claims bonus, okay? And that was more important than anything else. Driving experience, where you live, having a telematic device in your car, the amount of a claim if you made one, versus no claim. So if you didn't claim out, it could be 0 if you never made a claim, right? So that's why you can keep the observations in. But anyway, all of those other things, right? So what did SHAP find? SHAP gave back similar. The way that I've done it in SHAP here is I've actually got the specific features, the binary features. So the NCB 0 here means you have 0 years NCB, and it jumps right out on top. Okay. And so the way to kind of read this in a crude way is it's going to add that many euros to your quote. Okay. In this model. Next up is age 25, age 25. So age was second, as I said, in the absolute value test statistic thing. And then Longford is one of the locations, right? Jumps out next. Okay. Yeah, I've got Connor, got a hand up.
Yep, you have another question from Paolo. Paolo, if you just want to unmute your mic.
Lovely.
Yes, very clear so far. Thank you. Just a question on Shapley values. Indeed, they are known to have some limitations. They are very, powerful in a way, but one of the main issues is that they do not scale up. So if you include, let's say, more variables into the model, then you may get different explanations. So I was wondering whether we can follow, just as for robustness, a conditional approach, which means that, for example, you compute the Shapley values for location, let's say, separately by age groups, like explanatory fashion. That clearly is computationally more intensive, but can allow you to, do in a way, an analysis that is closer to models such as logistic regression, Whereas by doing Shapley as we are doing now, it is like a log linear model. Okay.
Yeah. So conditional SHAP. That's great. Are you finished the point, Paolo?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Really well made and great for my benefit and the benefit of everybody else in the call. You're absolutely right. And again, limitation of the work. I didn't go any further because I was wrapping this up and it was taking a long time to run. And, but that's just, it may be engaging with more compute power and more time to look at, as you say, better stratifications, more accurate to the reality rather than just getting it out. The one thing I will say in my defense, just for what I did do rather than what I didn't do, is that I did this a number of ways and tried to align, see if there was convergence on the inference. And I got to a certain point with that. But you're absolutely right. There's more that could be done here. And it would be interesting to see when you really drill down. And this is something that actually in the for car insurance, like when they have much bigger data sets and I'm assuming a lot of compute power, they should be going at this in that way and looking and they can get there. But I do think that we can do more. And I'd be happy to look into doing more, Paolo, with more time and more compute.
Yes, I mean, thank you, but clearly that is something that no one seems to pay attention to, because I've seen recently, many papers on Shapley values, but no one seems to be aware of this very fact that the analysis is not scalable. because the Shapley values, the value of Shapley values do depend on which variables you are considering. If you increase, let's say, from 4 variables to 6 or 7 or 8, values do change.
Yeah.
That is
Absolutely.
something that no one seems to be aware of, because that's where statisticians, for example, could bring some added value.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for the plug about promoting statisticians in this world of data science. So I'm with you. I'm with you on that, and like I do fall back on for the ease of doing it. The log linear model, I'm going to show some results from that, which is a multivariate analysis, which does have some complex interactions. But I didn't go any further on the SHAP side, and you're absolutely right. The values will change when the number of variables change. To the extent that our inference changes, that would be the really interesting thing to see. Because then this is the type of thing that when you get into a court of law and there's a claim of discrimination, it would probably have to get to this level of detail to demonstrate. I like just on the face of what I'm showing here for the benefit of others, this is the type of output that you would get from a basic SHAP analysis. That's kind of like, so we're doing kind of main effects here rather than interaction effects, if I want to use that term. So we have the feature sets, and rather than doing the interactions as Paolo suggested, right, where we take age and interact with location, we'd have age 25 in Longford, for example, and that would have its own row in the visual here. You do get this, like, this is what the type of thing it can present, and the graph on the right adds the value that, so it's still the same order. If you can see the two graphs, right, they're exact same order, because it's still the features in the listed in the importance according to the method. But the one on the right suggests how if you're high on a value of the feature, the impact from SHAP onto the target. So for NCB 0, right, it's a binary. So 1 means you have 0 NCB, right? And 0 means you don't, right? And if you are 1, so you're high on that, you're in the red territory, and it's increasing value on the target. The target here is quote, so you're increasing the quote. If you're low on NCB 0, which means you don't have NCB 0, you're in the blue territory and you're going the other way, right? What I find interesting about this value add compared to the graph on the left is that it gives you an indication of spread, and especially like for, say, Longford, right? So Longford, 1 is you live in Longford, and 0 is you don't. And 0 is nicely clumped here on the left of the 0 vertical, and it's blue. So it's lowering your quote, it's going that direction. But the spread, that would be cause for concern, and this would be evidence for what Paolo is suggesting, is to go further and say, hang on, that's not like just we know that all drivers, if they live in Longford, it's just one big blob of you're going to get 500 more euros on your quote. There's quite a spread there of drivers, so there's a lot of variation, it seems. Not all drivers in Longford are treated the same, and it's thinly spread out here on the line. So a visual like this can show you and add value. So you should do more if you're doing SHAP. Don't just do one graph of SHAP. You should look to do multiple graphs. Now, if people want to know more details on this, get in touch with me. But I won't go any further down in explaining this. But if anybody wants any more information, please do reach out, or just ask any questions now, like Paolo has. But that is, in essence, I was looking to see if I could understand the inference I'm getting here from all the models and the outputs. And just on the recursive feature elimination approach with cross-validation, apologies, this graph is not as nice as the SHAP. That's one thing to say, right? But it's a lot quicker to get this graph than it is to get the SHAP ones, okay? It's less computationally intensive. And it's upside down, and it's presenting way more of the features in this visual. But I just want to highlight, if you look down the bottom, we have, again, NCB 0, age 25 in Longford. Okay, so these come out as the 3, so there's this consistency, even at this main effect level, of these 3 representative features, of explaining more about the quotes than other features. Okay, now Dublin 17 just happens to be part of the location. So in the absolute value test statistic that I showed you, I just summarized and presented it. If you will, that was my privilege to do that. But essentially, I'm finding convergence here on the things that matter. The things that matter are the real car insurance derived variables like claims and no claims bonus. They're the key ones. And then driving experience, but then where you live. And so I wanted to look at some interactions, which I'll show you in a bit, but I don't think that's coming up next. What's coming up next is just proof of how gender and ethnicity inferred by name was not significant. So, and this might help you understand a bit about statistics as well, because these are post-estimation plots from the, since I saw this, okay, just to say, since I saw convergence between the random forest regression models and the SHAP and the recursive feature elimination that came after the random forest regression, and I saw convergence of understanding with the log linear regression models in terms of absolute value test statistic and feature importance, I went back to the log linear models in Stata and produced these graphs. Why? It's an easy thing to do. Very fast computationally, very explainable. Forgive me, but as Paolo said, there is work to be done on scaling up SHAP and especially conditional SHAP. But just for the purpose of the study, I'm going to go back to the easier, quicker thing and make the argument that, or the claim, the hypothesis, that the inference would not change dramatically when we do this with the more accurate random forest regression model. It is, but I do accept it's a hypothesis, and I should take my own medicine and demonstrate rather than just say. But anyway, just when you run the models and you can pull out effects and explore them visually. So I run these multivariate models. It's not just a quote on gender here, it's gender controlling for. So in the gender model, back in the, I'll go back to it here. So we are looking at, I think it's occupation for the gender one. But anyway, it's one with gender in it. These are multivariate models. So it's the effect of gender controlling for other things that matter way more than gender does. And just to show that we do this prediction. So the prediction is on the y-axis is the same for all of them. So it's the prediction of the quote amount on the log base 10 scale, because I did the conversion, the transformation before, in order to make the results to satisfy the assumptions of the model, make it more plausible. And we can see here we get point estimates, little dots. But the great thing about statistics is that there's always going to be a variation around it. So you have a degree of error around that point prediction, confidence interval, so to speak. And if the confidence intervals overlap between groups, then we would say that we don't have evidence to suggest there's a statistically significant difference between the groups. And in this case here, you can see that while the point estimate suggests that men would have a slightly lower quote than women in this model that we're looking at, because of the confidence intervals overlap, nothing to see here. Similarly, moving over to the right, then you can see the set of names we used. Again, most tightly bound is the Irish one, and this is because we had the most data on the Irish. So we had more observations on Irish. Remember, there's no women in this model. There's just men. But as you say, taking the same understanding, the confidence intervals across the line all overlap. So therefore, there's no statistically significant difference across just on ethnicity inferred by name alone in that model controlling for everything else. And that's why it goes right down to the bottom of the feature importance tables. Okay, so that's just visual evidence of the inference in relation to that. So that's the nothing to see bit. Now, I told you that we used strong contrast to pick our locations. So what I've done here is actually a descriptive statistic. This isn't actually derived post-estimation. This is actually done after data collection. So we used things like ethnicity on the right here. So this is coming from the 2016 census in Ireland. We took the proportion of white Irish in the areas that we looked at, the 20 locations. And that's on the right here. And then we put the quote that we received for each of those areas on a graph. So this is just a simple descriptive plot, scatter plot with a low S smooth curve added to try and detect a trend, okay? And that could be nonlinear as well. And you can see here on the graph on the right that as we go with less concentration of white Irish in the areas in our study, the curve upticks, right? And remember what I showed you from the UK study. So we're finding something in agreement here with what's going on in the UK, okay, in 2022. And this is our study in 2022 into 2023. And then on the left-hand side here, I'm presenting the penalty points version. And I have to say, this is on the county level. So we have these locations that are within counties, but they all go up to county level. And in the counties, because we couldn't get penalty points per location, per town, for example, or per suburb. We could only get it at a county level for the counties that are in our study. And then we took the per capita version, okay? And This is the quotes associated with being in these counties, for the drivers living in these counties, right? Based on the number of points in that county. So you might imagine that the number of penalty points in a location is a proxy for bad driving in that area, or certainly the level of surveillance in that area. But why is the surveillance there? Maybe because the police have done their homework and they say, okay, we need to put the vans here because we have had reports or accidents and so on, right? Then look at the lines, right? This is the number of quotes. I'm going to add a green horizontal line here across the screen to show at the highest point on the graph on the right goes beyond anything on the left, right? So this is the type of thing that I would encourage to be undertaken in a bias detection exercise, just to raise awareness. This is contextual stuff that it seems in our data set that if you have areas of greater ethnic diversity that have less concentration of white Irish people, the quotes are higher. And they're higher to the extent that they're higher than at any point of the per capita penalty points for that area or that county in that case, right? The penalty points is like, you might find this remarkable, but it's almost flat. It's almost horizontal. So as the level of penalty points are detected in that area, it doesn't seem to translate into the into higher quotes. And actually, if you go back to my table here with the penalty points model, you'll see the penalty points isn't above insurer, location, or age. So there's a bit of a telltale sign here that it's not really doing a lot of driving. It's not got that much heft. So that's an interesting one. And this is just a scripted data. It wasn't done post-model. It was pre-model estimation. It was just literally saying, okay, we use these criteria to select locations. Now let's use that information to map the quotes onto them and see what it looks like. Let's give another example. So on the right, we have deprivation decile, okay, where 10 is the most deprived in our study, and then and 1 is the least deprived. You can see an uptick as we go to the most deprived, higher quotes, okay? And then we have on the right here, this is at county level again. We've fatal road traffic accidents per capita in 2021, all right? Now, there is a little bit of an uptick here, but let's add the horizontal green line from the highest point across. So you would think, right, that, or you might think, that you know, the number of road traffic accidents, especially the fatal ones, because the whole point of speed detection and penalty points on our roads in Ireland is to reduce road deaths. We get a lot of advertisement on this, right? Now you can see, compared to penalty points, that having more road deaths in your area does lead to a slight uptick in your quote that you'll get. However, it seems to be the case in our data set, in our study, that if you're more deprived, it's more pertinent to getting a higher quote than whether there's more road deaths in your area per capita. Okay, again, contextual stuff, and this is pre-model estimation, but this is just really interesting. And what I would say about this is that, sure, when you move into an area, maybe we don't think about this, but when you move into an area or when you live in an area, you inherit the characteristics of that area. And what the UK guys found was that it wasn't that the individual drivers, if they had foreign sounding names, were discriminated against. No, it was that if the area had less concentration of the majority class, shall we say, and in the case of Ireland and England, white, that that area tended to have higher quotes, and that seems to matter more than some other contextual variables that you might think, like penalty points and road traffic accidents, would matter. So this is just really interesting, and we're raising awareness here. That's what we're doing in the first instance. And the thing is that as we move into this AI world, where we get more and more data and we get more and more data science to analyze it, if we're not aware of what's going on with this information and the proxies that can be out there, this AI is going to take it all in, inherit all of this stuff, and it's just going to do price discrimination way better than we did. But it also gives us the opportunity to hold a mirror up to ourselves, because we're in control here. We're the human in the loop here. We can say, okay, we were asking AI to help us because it's good for our business model. It's more accurate than us, and we can do things more effectively, more quickly, more efficiently. That's all great, right? But it also gets us to assess our decision making. And so actually, I think AI gives us a chance to assess our own decision making that we were doing pre-AI, and in all these different use cases. And it gets us to assess potentially unconscious bias that could lead to harmful bias. And that's the thing. There's unconscious bias that doesn't really lead to harmful bias, and there's also not high risk areas but it just gets us to assess. It's giving us an opportunity to assess. So I think that's a great opportunity as we adopt more AI to hold a mirror up to ourselves and say, how do we go about business before AI? And how can we, if we're using AI, like, and do we want to inherit the entire past, the entire history of whatever it is? Or do we want to add corrections and mitigations? We have the choice. We don't have to go on as we have done before. That's the point. But we can if it is the best thing to do or perceived to be the best thing to do. Okay, I'm close to the end of the results here. Where are we at now? Okay, 12:30. So thanks for staying with me. I'm going to end with some of these interaction post-estimation plots. So going back to the log linear regression models, I actually interacted in the model location, age, and claim. In this case, so I binarized claim. So whether you made a claim in the last 5 years, yes or no. Okay, so we know claim does a lot of the driving in this model because I showed you the feature importance is right at the top. So there's no controversy here that everything goes from no claim to claim, everything jumps up in the prediction model. The model predicts that you will get a higher quote if you've made a claim in the last 5 years and you put that into your application form. Okay, so that is not controversial. But what we've done here, and another thing that's not controversial is because we stratified by age, and if you see down the bottom here in the legend, so we've, the different colors, you will see that it's stacked in a certain way, and it's stacked with the lowest is 60, then 40, then 25 across the two locations. Hopefully your eyes can adjust to see that. But again, that wouldn't be controversial because age is a perfect proxy for driving experience and years in your own policy. So drivers are rewarded for more experience and more policy in their own name, more years like that. So therefore, that's also not controversial, I would say. Not being ageist or anything, but it is the case that the insurance company can evaluate more evidence from you because you've got more experience. So that's the reason why young people get discriminated against, because they don't have the evidence to present. So I wouldn't say that that was controversial, that lower quotes go to more experienced drivers. Now let's get to the bit where it's the juicy bit here. I've added an extreme contrast. I've taken on average, from this the descriptive statistics, Longford was the area that had the highest quotes in our samples, and Crookstown in County Cork had the lowest. Okay, so this is an example that's outside of Dublin, so it's a good one if you like. There's always this idea in Ireland, for those that are not Irish, that like there's this bias, like the big smoke in Dublin. It's all about Dublin. Here's an example that's in the countryside or outside of Dublin, giving recognition to the rest of Ireland. And you can look it up on the map, but Longford's in the Midwest region of Ireland, and Crookstown is down south in the County Cork. And people from Cork very proud. The rebel county, they would say Cork City was the real capital of Ireland. Okay, so that's enough of that Irish blarney for you. But I took an extreme to see what it would look like. Okay, and what I want to show you here, if you can see the color difference. Apologies if you can't, but essentially at all stages, the drivers of each age group in the area of Crookstown. Crookstown, by the way, why has it got the lowest quotes? It's a very well-heeled area. It's if you go back to the contextual information, I should have explained this better. This is a strong contrast on the aspects that we chose to select the areas. So it's less ethnically diverse. It is more. It's less socioeconomically deprived. Higher house prices. Okay, lower crime. Longford is the contrast to all of that. And what does that mean for the quotes? For the predicted quotes? So at every stage, the richer area gets lower quotes, even to the extent that the driver of 60 years of age in Longford is being predicted to get a higher quote than a 25-year-old in Crookstown. Okay, so that's that area over here with no claim. And then if they've made a claim, they both jump. In fact, there's a widening. There's a slight widening if you go to a claim. Okay? And at every stage, so this is just a clear indication of wow, if you live in Crookstown, and remember, there's a lot of things we held the same here. If you were with me when we went through the method section, a lot of things we held the same here. Same car, okay, and all the rest of it. The difference here is on location, and the contrast that makes for the drivers if you happen to be in Longford versus in Crookstown. This is a clear separation between the two, and it's one of the things I wanted to point out to you. Quite striking. And now, obviously, by design, I'm taking a very extreme example here. If I went closer to the center of the distribution and took locations that were similar, these lines would be overlapping and all the rest of it, and maybe even parallel. But anyway, giving you an extreme example to point out at the extreme ends of this of what we're doing here, what we generated, the type of outcome to be explored. Now, on occupation, I highlighted it before. We looked at a number of occupations, but we started with retail because it was, according to the data, it was the most popular occupation in Ireland at the time that we started the study. So we started with retail, and all drivers were retail. But then, because we were finding no gender difference, right? Just on whether you were male or female, and that's a great thing to find, and it's ratified in law. We tried this trick of proxy. So we then we wanted to diversify the occupation, but we also wanted to take like what were perceived as more male-dominated professions and more female-dominated professions. Should take this off the screen for a minute, and you'll see here that it might be clear which ones go towards male-dominated, which ones go towards female-dominated. Just shout if you have any difficulty appreciating that. So we tried to go through the back door, so to speak, indirectly at gender discrimination through taking that approach. Maybe we're being too clever trying to do too much, but you'll see that there is some differences there because there is non-overlapping confidence intervals. So we can see differences between a farmer and a fisher, not an example, and a nurse as well. So farmers and nurses quoted lower than fisher and logger. Teachers and nurses, okay, down low with farmers, and textile workers are up. But disappointingly, you might say again, this is another area where we didn't go any further, okay, and it's another avenue of attack for someone else, or if we get a great grant and we go at this again. I'm not going to go any further than that to explore the gender divide through the back door. So, but we just set it up. But what I want to point out here is that retail really stood out compared to these. And we were thinking that the reason this was, even though we put everybody in as social only, actually, where we had the opportunity to do so, people weren't using their car for commercial reasons. We found that this could be a legacy effect of the idea of a traveling salesperson. That by our consciousness, in our minds, that retail people could be on the road more than other professions, right? And as a result, if you one of the ways you can be high risk is if you're on the road driving more and more. Okay. Now retail shot out here, and we just singled it out and said, okay, is it uniform across our locations? So is everybody getting a spike? So let's have a look. Now I'm going to do a Dublin-centric thing. I'm going to take two locations in Dublin to end on. I'm going to take Balbriggan on the left here, which is in North County Dublin, to the very north of the county. And that is our Longford in this case. Okay, so Balbriggan is similar to Longford, more diverse, more deprived. Glenageary is down in South County Dublin. It's a really well-heeled area, some of the highest house prices in the country. Okay, so we have the extremes in North and South Dublin. Okay, and if for anybody that knows Ireland or knows Dublin, Dublin is separated by a river called the River Liffey, and it's there is such a thing as a North Sider compared to a South Sider. Okay, and this is the type of thing that would add fuel to that fire. I myself actually identify as a North Sider. I was born and bred in the North Side, but I'm currently living on the South Side, so I am well-rounded, shall we say? But from that perspective, but there is a thing, a North Side versus South Side in Dublin, just to say, adding some more context there for anybody who doesn't appreciate that. But let's have a look at this. So we binarized the occupation variable, and we had retail versus the others. Okay, so we just collapsed all the others into zero in this case. Okay, and again, you might think, you know, was that a good idea? Well, just for this, just bear with me for what this is. So we singled out the retail people, the retail drivers, and again, we stratified it by age. And here we see something that's going on. So we would expect to see a jump in retail when you put down retail. So this is predicted quote, putting down a multivariate model setup. So this is the occupation model, but we binarized the occupation into retail as one. And we would expect to see a jump in premium because that's the direction of travel based on the when we had it categorized for all locations. But that's not exactly what we see to the same extent, right? So here in the contrast, it's almost parallel lines for the Glenageary. So they've got, like, you know, very light green, darker green, and a kind of a maroon color, right? They do have a little uptick, but it's very slight compared to Balbriggan. And in all cases, because Balbriggan is more diverse and more deprived, at all cases, the Balbriggan age equivalent is higher than the Glenageary. So our starting point is that if you live in Glenageary, you're always going to get a lower quote, predicted to get a lower quote than living in Balbriggan. But if you go from another occupation like I listed on the previous screen, to retail. Look at the jump for if you live in Balbriggan. At all age groups, they swing up. They drift up way more dramatically than if you live in Glenageary. So I'm just saying that's quite interesting. Okay. And that's the type of thing that is like, okay, there's some sort of like the Citizens Advice guys, they talk about penalty. Is there a penalty going on here? Just by switching profession into retail and living in Balbriggan versus living in Glenageary at these different age groups. It's quite striking. And again, this is going towards raising awareness around your profession and where you live mattering for your quote, regardless of whether you're social only or commute using commercial reasons. Again, that's another thing we didn't do. But this will, I imagine all of this might feed into down the line doing proper analysis of bias, and then where, you know, it may be in the court of law having to demonstrate that someone feels they've been discriminated against, demonstrate that they haven't been. Okay. And again, we're just raising awareness here rather than just throwing all the data into AI saying, because AI is good for the business, let's run with it and let's inherit the history of our lives and just like see what happens. Run fast and break things, right? That's the Silicon Valley thing. Well, an AI Act gives us a great chance to say, hang on a second here, let's hold a mirror up to ourselves and let's make better decisions for all of us where more people benefit. Okay, guys, wrapping up. And I promise I'm virtually done now at this stage. I said more information. It's basically more publicity, and it's really just a shameless plug. Because what I want to leave you with is what you would have seen from the job advert. Job advert? Why did I say job advert? I meant webinar advert. This isn't a job. Is it a job advert? I don't know. But just to give you a few more QR codes if you might want to take. If you want to learn more about this study and also appreciate how it's been written up in different forms. So I've already shown you the book chapter that's been published. You've got that. On the left, Cedar wrote a blog, and it's a very good one. So the QR code to that is there on the left. On the right, the Irish Tech News wrote a blog about it as well, which you can listen to an audio version of it if you want. It's about 5 minutes long, and you'll get a different flavor for how this was digested in the media. As I said, this landed in early June and it made a splash. And I'll just leave that there for a couple more seconds if people want to take the QR codes. If not, you can come back and get the slides off me or whatever. But I've got a couple more QR codes for you. So it wasn't just print. I did a bit of radio interviewing. So on the left, I got the call up to go on Pat Kenny's national morning show. Pat Kenny probably has the biggest and best mid-morning show in all of Ireland with the biggest listenership. So it was quite a thing to get on this show based on the press release of this study. And I got 5 minutes with this guy. So you can click on the QR code on the left to listen to that. And actually that will allow you to listen to the person who comes on afterwards. And I hope you will appreciate they didn't read the report at all. And this just goes to show what happens when someone like me, coming from a more technical research academic background, steps onto a public platform, gets 5 minutes in the spotlight, then has to step back, has no right of reply. Someone comes on after you and just goes blah, 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 blah. And it's left up to the listener to decide which side of the tracks they want to be on. It's just part and parcel of doing this outreach part of the work, which I do think is essential. And I will continue to do it and take on the challenge of being robust, but also trying to be understandable, relatable, and even trustworthy. I mean, if I'm going to be doing trustworthy AI, it has to start with me, right? You have to think I'm trustworthy too. And doing that is a challenge in terms of communicating. But that was a good experience. And then I got more, Highland Radio got in touch because Donegal is in the study. And so they came calling the following day, and I got 15 minutes with this guy. Is his name there? I've forgotten his name, but anyway, it was a great chat. You'll have to skip to 10 minutes in to get my segment, but I get 15 minutes, and I get a lot more opportunity to go deeper into the themes of the research than I did with Pat Kenny. So if I got to appreciate both formats, where it was just me with the guy on the right in Highland Radio, whereas I was in a segment with another contributor in the Pat Kenny show. But obviously it was a bigger listenership than the Highland Radio one. But anyway, worth a listen, and feel free to come back to me on it. And I welcome all advice and suggestions going forward, because I will continue to do this, but it's always, any advice on how to present oneself in public and communicate is always welcome. And then, yeah, last slide, more QR codes and another profile pic as my final gift, me facing the other way. For those that don't notice it, and 2 more QR codes for you. For anybody who wants to take the data set, we've made it available on the QR code on the left. I hope to make this available on Alessandro's repository, but for the moment, you can get it on the left. And if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, you can get me on the right. And my email address is down the bottom. And with that, I give back to the chair for questions and answers. I'll just leave the screen up a bit longer for people to take.
I have one question in the Q&A there. Did the insurance industry refute the findings?
No, they didn't. We haven't had any dialogue with the insurance industry yet. So not that I'm aware of anyway yet. So if anybody has any updates for me, please do let me know. We have had no contact from the insurance industry yet. What we did have was contact from the Department of Finance, and they asked for a call to discuss the report in greater detail. And they were coming at it from, generally their perspective has been on the competition side. So making sure that there's enough competition in the market for Irish citizens to get a reasonable quote. But I think the thing that they found interesting, well, there's 2 aspects. One is, as we get more and more into AI, I think they're more and more interested to try and keep on top of like the way this could go in terms of their skill sets to be able to regulate. And the other thing was, an aspect that they weren't focusing on so much was, if you take the same driver and just move them around the country, how does that affect their quote? And that's on the that's on a level that they may be interested in, because it's a macro bird's eye view of what's going on. Because us individuals, we shop around and we only see what we get back out of the marketplace. So like, you go shopping around, and by the way, this study confirms you definitely should shop around. For sure. But you shop around, you get like, if you look at 10 places, you get 10 quotes, you make a decision on that basis. But what you don't know is, what if I lived in Cork rather than lived in Longford? Or what if I lived in Wicklow rather than Donegal? What difference would that have made to my quote? And that is something that I think that they were interested in and they might take forward. And that's something they weren't really considering before. Because who is looking out for the citizen on the macros side in that regard? Certainly not the individuals.